Hello wine people, welcome to Thirsty and Wise, where we simplify wine. My name is Peter and I'm a certified WSET wine and spirit educator. In this video, I'll explain everything what you need to know about food and wine pairing for your WSET Level 3 in wine course and exam, or if you just want to learn about wine, please consider subscribing, joining the Thirsty and Wise community, because we talk about a very complex subject, wine, in a very simple way. And let's start this video. Okay, wine people, in this video I will talk about things to consider when recommending or personally enjoying food and wine pairing. I will explain the basic wine and food elements and how they interact between each other. Other considerations besides the basic ones, I will explain what are high-risk wines and why they're challenging to pair with food, and also why they can be super interesting. I'll explain also the alternative approaches to food and wine pairing. I will show you the example of 12 food and wine pairing classics and why they work, and then multiple choice question and short written answer questions for food and wine pairing for WSET Level 3 in wines. I will make it in the next video. So things to consider: take advantage of interaction 10 plus 12 equals 30. The idea is that food and wine pairing, when pairing food and wine together, can give you a more pleasurable, more pleasure in food and wine pairing interactions than just enjoying food and wine on its own. Sensitivities to aromas and flavors and personal preferences are super important. First of all, if you're recommending food and wine pairing, make sure that you know personal preferences of your guest, because people that don't enjoy certain flavors and combinations, don't recommend them that. Ask a couple of questions, what people like, what they don't like, and then base your recommendations based on that. So if you're not enjoying high alcohol, if you're not enjoying high acidity, if you're not enjoying tannin and bitterness in the wine, based on this information that you get, base your information. If a person doesn't like tannin in the wine, don't recommend them a Barolo example. Food and wine basic interactions. So there's, next to your personal preferences, things to consider is food and wine pairing elements. So these are things that are not negotiable. They either work or they don't work. It doesn't matter if they're your personal preferences or not. If you're eating cake, for example, and you're drinking a high acid and oaked white wine, that wine will taste acidic, metallic, and bitter every single time. So these are things, basic food and wine pairing element interaction, that I will explain, and that you should definitely consider them when pairing food with wine. So basic food and wine elements. Food impacts wine more than wine impacts food. So the idea is that the food elements can make more change in the wine than the elements in the wine can make the changes in the food. So really why is this important? Important is because wine is not cheap. You want to take the positive advantages of food and wine pairing. So when you're buying that wine and you want to have a pleasurable experience, these food and wine pairings are super important, because to give you a more pleasurable experience, and also for that wine to taste even better. So things to consider, flavors to consider in food are sweetness, umami, salt, acid, flavor intensity, fat, hot chili, and bitterness. And then elements in the wine are fruitiness, sweetness, acidity, body, richness, intensity, alcohol, tannin, and oak. And then I will explain how they work. So elements in the red are high risk elements in the food, and are challenging flavors in the food that are challenging to pair, but there are ways that you can that you can pair them successfully. Then elements in the high risk foods and challenging flavors are sweetness and umami. Then I'll explain what happens to a wine if you're pairing it with this kind of food, considerations when pairing wine with this kind of food, and then on the right you have the risk level. Either the flavors are high risk, like in case of sweetness and umami, it means that they're not impossible to pair, but they're more challenging to pair. Then acidity and salt are positive elements in the food. They interact very positively with wines every single time. But of course there are things to consider when pairing with this wine, but they're generally considered low risk food elements. And then bitterness in chili is actually a personal preference. People can enjoy bitterness or not, or they can enjoy chili food or not. And then I'll explain food and wine pairings that you can consider. So let's start with sweetness and umami. They make the wine taste, both of them. They decrease the body of the wine, they decrease the sweetness of the wine and fruitiness, and they increase the bitterness and acidity. So things to consider with sweet food is considered a wine that is more sweet than the food, because the sweet food will make the wine taste more drier. So if you have a sweet wine, it will make it taste a little bit less sweet, which is not the end of the world. And then when you're having umami flavor, I don't talk too much about umami because personally it's very challenging for me to explain it to people. I don't understand it myself that well. But umami flavors are usually found a lot in Asian cuisine with soya sauces or with raw meat or raw vegetables, but they're always covered with other flavors like acidity. Like for example, spinach is high in umami, but we put salt on it, we put lemon, we can put yogurt on it, so that umami flavor is lower down. But anyway, with high umami flavor food, things to consider is either a white wine that doesn't have oak, so oak can create that bitterness in wine, and also tannin in red wines. If you're eating something with umami and you want to have a red wine, consider a low tannin red wine, so that tannin doesn't taste as bitter. Then salt and acidity, they make wine taste even better. So acidity in the wine increases the body, the sweetness, the fruitiness in the wine. It decreases acidity. So things to consider with a high acidic food is make sure you're having a wine that is high in acidity, because the food will make the wine, the acidic food will make the wine taste less acidic. So if the wine on its own is maybe too acidic, and then if you're pairing it with high acidic dish, that's going to be fine, because the acidity in wine and food will be balanced. But if you're eating something acidic and you're having already wine that is medium to medium minus in acidity, that can be an issue, because the food can make the wine taste flabby. With salt is great. Salt brings out the flavors in the wine. Great with simple sweet wines, great with acidic wines. Salt is like is flavor for the food, but it's also flavor for the wine. It brings out the flavors in wine. It's like, you ever heard, for example, people putting a little bit of salt in their chocolate, in hot chocolate? It brings the flavor of the chocolate. So that's the idea. Bitterness in food, so increases the bitterness in wine. So if you're eating something bitter, again, things like similar recommendation like with umami, try to have a wine that doesn't have a bitter element. Don't drink something that is oaked, and don't drink wines that are high in tannin. Chili and heat. This is very subjective because some people enjoy spicy food, some people don't enjoy spicy food. Spiciness in food increases the bitterness, acidity, and heat of alcohol in the wine. So, and it increases the body richness, sweetness, and fruitiness. So if you're not a big fan, if you're eating something spicy, maybe it's too spicy, consider having a wine that is low in alcohol, and also having residual sugar to cover, to calm down that spiciness in the food. On the other hand, you know, if you're just enjoying spicy food and, you know, that's your main objective, you know, and you want to drink a 15% alcohol wine, you know, go crazy. It's your it's your choice. But at least you know what you're putting yourself into. Other things to consider except this basic food and wine pairing interactions is flavor intensity of the wine and the food. The idea is when you're doing the food and wine pairing, you know, you want to enjoy the flavor of the wine and the food in the same time. You don't want one or the other to overpower each other. So consider the intensity of the wine with the intensity of the food. If the food is super flavorful and super intense and rich, then you should have a wine that is in similar level to that. You know, if you're having, for example, it's not just white meat with white wine and red meat with red wine. It doesn't work like that. It's not the only thing to consider. It's the general flavor intensity. You know, if you're having, for example, a white fish poached with lemon and salt and olive oil, these flavors are very light and they're very easy to overpower. So, you know, you should pair it with something that is going to complement the flavors of that dish, you know, so something acidic, something light, something fresh and fruity. On the other hand, if you're having a braised dish that is cooked for a long time and it's super rich and intense, you know, and if you're pairing it with a simple white wine, you know, you're not gonna enjoy, you know, the dish will, the flavor of the dish will be overpowering the wine. So maybe a better combination would be a more richer, fuller body red wine that can, you know, match the flavors and intensity of that dish and actually complement the flavors, and, you know, it's going to be a much better combination. You're going to enjoy the flavors of the wine and also the food. Acid and fat. Acid in a wine and fat in a dish go very well together, because the fattiness in a dish will cover your palate, and then it will be like a layer that needs to cut through with the acidity. So when you're having something oily and fatty, when you're eating something like that and having a high acidic wine, it goes very well, because that acidity is going to cut through the fat, you know, it's going to clean your palate, and actually the acidity will be balanced out by that. You know, I always mention this, in my country we have a dish that's called burak. It's a very oily, fatty dish, and we drink yogurt, which is like a sour milk drink, and the sour milk drink is very acidic, and it goes very well with the fatty dish, because, you know, it's cleansing your palate, it's cutting through the fat of that dish. Sweet and salty. This is a classic food and wine pairing that you know, you have a salty Stilton blue cheese, which is very salty, it's very high intense in flavor, and goes very well with port. It complements the flavor of sweet port. It really goes well with each other. So I think thing to consider. So something salty and something sweet. Try it. High risk wines, but interesting. So high risk wines are oaked wines, high tannin wines, high acidity wines, high alcohol wines, and complex flavor wines. These things are considered high risk because if you do the food and wine pairing in a wrong way, example, food high in umami or sweetness, and you pair it with a high tannin and oaked wine, you're going to bring out the bitterness from the oak and from the tannin. But on the other hand, if you have, for example, a dish that is salty and high in fat and flavor intensity, and then you pair it with a red wine that's high in tannin and high in acidity, that flavors can go very well. When complex flavors, usually if you have a very simple dish, simple in flavor, I would go with simple flavors in a wine. Example would be, let's say, a green salad with olive oil and salt, and some vinegar. A Pinot Grigio, a simple Pinot Grigio would go very, very well. But on the other hand, if you're having, for example, let's say a lobster with a creamy butter sauce and maybe a little bit of truffle, then that dish deserves a little bit more richer wine, more complex wine, a wine that can match the flavors. Maybe a little oak Chardonnay, for example, that is aged for some time, so complex, full body, rich, to complement the flavors of a complex dish. Just an idea. Alternative approaches: matching flavors, contrasting flavors, local wine and local food, red wine with meat, white wine with fish. So all these are things to consider, but they're not gonna work if you don't follow the basic food and wine pairing interactions. Okay. So classic food and wine pairings and why they work. So sweet with sweet. Examples: Sauterne with sweet fruit tart. Why it works: the wine sweetness matches the dessert, preventing it from tasting overly acidic or bitter. So sweet goes well with sweet. And this is also a good example of complementing flavors that match each other. So sweet fruit tart has very similar flavors to Sauterne. Umami food with light tannin wine. Example: mushroom risotto with Pinot Noir. So mushrooms is considered a high umami flavor food, and then mushroom risotto goes very well with Pinot Noir. So why it works: light tannin prevent the wine from becoming overly bitter, while the flavors complement each other. So mushrooms, they have these earthy flavors that Pinot Noir is also described in many cases, that Pinot Noir has this mushroom flavors, and it also can taste like forest floor and earthy, so flavor complementing each other. And also I can say that, for example, risotto is, it has butter usually in it. So butter is very oily, rich. Pinot Noir has high acidity, so it can cut through that richness as well. So salt in food to enhance flavor in white wine. Example: salty oysters with Chablis. So why it works: the salt enhances fruitiness and balances the acidity in the wine. Bitter food with wine that will balance the bitterness. Example: grilled radicchio with Merlot. Why it works: the wine's fruitiness and low tannins balances the bitterness in the food. Spicy food with wine with residual sugar. So example: spicy Thai curry with off-dry Riesling. Why it works: the wine's residual sugar calms the heat, while the acidity refreshes the palate. Intensity with intensity. Example: roast lamb with Syrah. Why it works: the bold flavors of wine match the intensity of the savory herbaceous lamb dish. Fatty dish and high acid wine. Example: creamy pasta with Sauvignon Blanc. Why it works: the wine's acidity cuts through the fat, cleansing the palate and balancing richness. Salty with food. Example: Blue cheese with port, why it works. The wine's sweetness counterattacks the saltiness, creating a harmonious contrast. Matching flavor, example, buttery lobster with oak chardonnay, why it works. The wine's buttery flavors mirror the richness of the dish. Contrasting flavor, example, spicy grilled chicken with rosé, why it works. The wine's light body and refreshing acidity contrasts the smoky and spicy flavors of the chicken. Local wine and food, example, prosciutto and melon with lambrusco, why it works. The slightly sparkling fruity wine complements the local pairing, balancing saltiness and sweetness. My choice, Nebbiolo with Piemontese pasta with truffle butter, why it works. The wine's high acidity cuts through the richness of the butter, while its earthy truffle-like aromas complement the flavors of the truffle in the pasta. And my final advice is don't look for, I get this a lot, what's the perfect food and wine pairing. Do not look for perfect pairing, but focus on preferences of your guests, but be adventurous. Wine people, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope this video was fun and informative. Please let me know if you have any questions, concerns, and let me know what's your favorite, not perfect, but favorite food and wine pairing. Until next video, when I'm gonna show you the WSET Level 3 in wines multiple choice questions and short written answer questions about food and wine pairing. Stay thirsty and wise.